So in this video, I want to talk about Ukraine's third counteroffensive strategy. We saw what happened with the first one. It didn't go very well, and they shifted gears, and then they shifted gears again, and that's what I want to talk about. So Russia and Ukraine are not playing the same game. They're in the same war. They're fighting each other, but they're approaching it very differently. And it's not helpful to say one party's playing chess and the other party's playing checkers, or one's playing chess and the other's playing poker. I don't think that really helps very much. Um, Now, before I get into how they've shifted into a third type of strategy, let's talk about some background. So Russia holds ground. Okay, now they've lost a lot of ground to 40,000 square kilometers or something that they first seized, they have lost. But then they lost it behind these defensive lines that they had to build. And they had these defensive positions where they now have dragon's teeth, and then they have maybe barbed wire or trenches or artillery supporting and already zeroed in and that kind of thing. Minefields, all that kind of thing. They're content to sit and wait. They're not actually even trying to take the rest of those 4 oblasts that they gobbled up last year. They're just content to sit and wait. So for all their talk about how we're going to take all of the oblasts, they're not really worried about that. They want to hold what they have right now. They're not thinking in an offensive game. They prefer a long engagement. Actually, they prefer it to be over, like for peace to be made right now, where they just take what they have. But short of that, which you're not going to get, they prefer a long engagement, something that will wear out their opponent. And they get a political win, not by just sitting and waiting, because they can sit and wait and it doesn't look like much, but every time that they blow up a building or attack something that is really a symbolic kind of thing, or something that gets large, boom, boom, large media attention, they get a symbolic win. It doesn't matter. Like somebody asked me the other day, would Russia be better off if they used their missiles targeting military? And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting question. Militarily, numerically, they would certainly be better off, but they would lack in the information space, and that's why they do what they're doing with the targeting buildings. That, and they think that somehow they're going to force Ukrainians to knuckle under, and that's absolutely absurd. So that's how they get their win. They're like, if I have to mix analogies or mix my metaphors now, they're like a sole proprietor who owns their own business and can make all their own decisions about what they're going to do, as opposed to Ukraine, who's like a public corporation that has stockholders that want to see results. Okay? So Ukraine needs a win. Okay? Ukraine has to have a win. They're like, it's not like baseball where you have 3 strikes, and I know that I'm speaking to an audience that may not understand baseball. So in baseball, when you get to the plate, somebody throws a pitch, and you're at bat, and you have 3 strikes, right? You can, if you swing and you miss, you get a strike. If it goes into the strike zone and you don't swing, it's a strike. But so there's no called outs like in baseball, or called strikes. But if you wait too long, you're going to forfeit. And that's what's going on with Ukraine. Ukraine is powered by partners that need to see victory. They need to see it, and they need to see it sooner than later. Now, this is actually one of the actual weaknesses in a democracy. And Putin understands this. Hitler understood this. Hitler talked about this, how he thought that democratic states were far inferior than authoritarian regimes, because in a democracy, the will of the people can ebb and flow, and they have to listen to what the people have to say. And in my next video, I'm going to be talking about this with what's going on in the United States, and like how that is shaping that political turf. What's going on is actually going to potentially be something that will play to Putin's advantage if we're not careful. Just wait for that video. Okay, so Hitler understood that. Putin understands that. Putin will stop not when his people rise up and say, "We demand that you stop, or we're throwing you out of office," but whenever he decides. In the United States, it's different. In most Western countries, it's different. So we have to keep the people in support of this. Otherwise, they can lose their support. And if they lose their Western support, they lose militarily to Russia, or it'll be very, very difficult for Ukraine to win against Russia without Western weapons and support. Okay. So it's a different kind of thing. In the United States, elections are in November of 2024. Now, that's a long ways away. We still have, some time, but it could go very wrong if it's not careful. So support goes up with a victory, and it goes down as things seem to stall. And just witness the polls about what happened when Wagner did their freedom march or rebellion or whatever it was. Public support in the United States actually went to a all-time high since the very beginning of the war. So the counteroffensive is not going very well, and it's playing it on Russia's terms. Remember, Russia had 6 months to dig in. So that 6 months to dig in was mostly because it was 6 months to get all the weapons that they needed, and they still don't have the air support, but to get the weapons that they needed and for the winter to thaw so that they could actually do what they're doing. But that 6 months was critical time. Okay, so Ukraine's first strategy was a head-on assault, and this was a bad idea. They shouldn't have done. I have a hard time saying they shouldn't have done it. They had to do something, right? But what they did, they found out in short order was not a good idea. And those on the pro-Russian side of the spectrum were absolutely rejoicing that, look, they lost 20% of the equipment that they put into this battle. They were saying it like it was 20% of all the equipment, and it wasn't. But 20% of what they had committed into this was lost immediately. And within the first 2 weeks. That's bad. We don't want to do that. So they pulled back. They thought, okay, let's try this differently. And so their second strategy was they backed off and started targeting logistics, supply hubs, however they could to degrade the enemy with long-range artillery and missiles. And that was reasonably effective, but it's not gaining any kilometers on the ground. And they need to show we have X number of square kilometers or square miles, and they weren't getting that. Okay, so they shifted now to a third strategy, and I think this third strategy is useful. But remember, it's not like we're going to do this, and now we're going to do that, and now we're going to do this other thing. It's not like that. It's stacking one on top of the other on top of the other. So they're still trying to get through on the minefields and through trenches and things like that. On top of that, they've also shifted gears and tried to add, trying to destroy the logistics hubs and other things. And on top of that, they're applying this strategy. And this strategy, I think, is reasonably effective. So this third strategy is harassment in various places. So they're creating visible, and visible is important because they're getting these wins. They're getting this, some information war value out of this. Visible, and it creates dilemmas for the Russians. Yesterday, I talked about how they're creating problems for the Russians. Somebody corrected me, talked about how Ryan Macbeth said, it's not problems. Problems can be solved. It's dilemmas. He's right. I'm wrong. I misspoke. I spoke too loosely. So they're creating dilemmas for Russia. So, for example, the incursions into Belgorod. Whoa, now they have to figure out how to support, that border defense where they didn't have to do that before. A drone strike in Moscow. Whoa, how did that get through? Or did it get through, or did it come from somewhere internally? Kerch Bridge on fire. No. Kerch Bridge on fire. That created a huge dilemma. Another drone strike in Moscow. Seaborne, a drone attack on Russian ships, destroying bridges, crossing, and most recently yesterday, and they've been doing this for a while, but yesterday we saw they were across the Dnipro River with small special forces, and then they were attacking the Russians on the other side, and it was a pretty visible display. Now that's not where they thought they would be able to cross because of the river is a natural barrier. So they're doing these things, and they're keeping the Russians off balance with that. And that's providing some tangible success. But doing that alone won't get you anywhere. They have to actually get the real breakthrough in order to get public support back. Because, think about it like a sports team. In my Power and Influence class, we talk, Robert Cialdini we used his book Influence, Science, and Practice, and like he pointed out, when your sports team is winning, you don't say they won, you say we won, right? And when they lost, you say, oh, they lost the game, right? And that's there's a certain psychology here that you have to understand, and that I think is carrying over to what's going on here. So as Ukraine wins, as Ukraine actually gets results, they'll gain more and more support, and they need to be gaining this support. So these strategies are layered. This is a new counteroffensive strategy, but it can only go so far. Hopefully, this third layer will actually stretch the Russians thinner so that they can actually make the layer 1 breakthrough. I hope that makes sense. So that it allows them on the front line to actually make the breaks, because they're distracted by the seaborne attack and the crossing of the river, and they're stretched further than they actually have the capacity to defend. Okay, so that's all that I wanted to communicate about this with the third strategy, the third counteroffensive strategy. In my next video, I'm going to talk about how the political scene shapes what's going on. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your interest, your likes, your shares, your subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.